invite Kevin, Carlton, and Kimano up here to take us into the next session.
Thank you very much, Nigel. This next session, it deals with the regional and global IGF activities, and we really intend to have this as a brief session to look at how we connect various IG spaces. We're going to continue a bit of the dialogue that Albert started just now in terms of participation within ICANN. But what I want to look at in particular, I will be doing a short introduction of the topic and a flash presentation on one of these regional spaces called the LAC IGF, the Latin American and Caribbean Preparatory Meeting for the Internet Governance Forum. I am flanked by my esteemed panelist, Carlton, who is a regional expert in terms of seeing what has occurred in the past in terms of Caribbean participation in global fora, and looking at how we could increase that influence and participation at the global IGF. And also, we have Kimano, who will be sharing his reflections and his considerations as a national internet community that is beginning to navigate through this complex landscape that is internet governance. So I'm going to continue on the ICANN discussion just for a tad bit. I recently participated. I follow loosely the GAC, meaning I'm not officially registered as a GAC observer, but I follow loosely the GAC. And one of the things with the GAC is that it has also provided within recent times a space for further collaboration and further engagement among fellow observers who provide support to the government. And one of these spaces happened to be the Public Safety Working Group, which is a subcommittee of the GAC. And it's through this working group, the RIR community, it comes together and it sits with law enforcement agencies to speak specifically about what our responsibilities are when it comes to maintaining the WHOIS database, and exactly how it is we can collaborate with law enforcement and how you access information between these communities, in particular when it comes to investigating cyber incidents, etc. So the GAC and the subcommittees of the GAC provide for this sort of opportunity as well for the RIRs to have some bearing in the work and the issues that are discussed. So I anticipate after we do our initial presentation in the exchange, in the dialogue afterwards with the audience, we can continue to discuss these and other matters. On the issue of NRIs, and yesterday we heard of NRIs, the National and Regional IG initiatives. We know they are convened to discuss public policy issues related to the internet. And I think we ought to also recognize some of the characteristics about them. So for instance, they're expected to be organic and independent, and also adherent to the main IGF principles of being open, inclusive, and non-commercial, with a bottom-up decision-making process and a multi-stakeholder participation mechanism guiding their organization. And within this, when we see all these multiple spaces, we also have to recognize that it's not a question of them being hierarchical. There's no question of hierarchy when it comes to the multiple spaces that we talk about, the national level, the regional level. what the internet's distributed architecture allows for, it allows for us to apply a governance principle called subsidiarity, where it is that you address matters at the lowest common denominator, where the matters occur closest. And when that avenue is exhausted and you see that it can be solved at that level, if there's something that goes on to the other levels, then you address it there. But subsidiarity is key in how we look at internet governance matters. And of course, Carlton and Kimano may continue on that thread in their discussions. So across Latin America and the Caribbean, there are roughly 16 NRIs, 14 being at the national level. And these include Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil, Colombia, Costa Rica, Dominican Republic, Ecuador, El Salvador, Mexico, Panama, Paraguay, Peru, Uruguay, and Venezuela. And of course, we have our two regional processes, the CIGF and the LAC IGF. And that's where I'm going to segue into this flash presentation about the LAC IGF. The LAC IGF started in 2008, and there were three founding organizations that came together for this. LACNIC, NUPEF, which is a research organization based in Brazil, and ACP, which is the Association for Collaborative, APC, Association for Progressive Community. Yes, APC, or Association for Progressive Communications. It's a civil society organization. And the aims that they wanted to address at that point dealt with identifying relevant and priority areas for the LAC group at the IGF meetings. And they also saw this as a channel and as a vehicle to raise awareness and to promote more participation of the regional community in those spaces. Other key dates in 2011, we actually had a merger of LAC IGF with CIGF, which was held in Trinidad and Tobago. At that point in time, for the first time, LAC IGF applied the principle of an open consultation to set its agenda. And they also established a steering committee to guide the work and the development of future LAC IGF meetings. 2012 had the record amount of online discussion and remote participation, which was testament to the investments that had been made in live streaming tools, interpretation, and it's really pushed at that point in time by the government of Colombia that wanted to ensure that for an internet governance space, we needed to use the tools and mechanisms to encourage conversations within the room and also by the online community, by the end users who were following. And then in 2016, we have for the first time the inclusion of a youth LAC IGF arm. And this is a group of youths who come together the day before the main LAC IGF days to get involved in IGF matters, to discuss what is pertinent to them and to also explore the channels in which youths in particular can play greater roles in the development of internet public policy. Also, this year we had support for native language participation for Portuguese speakers, meaning that the de facto language tended to be just Spanish. And while there are interpretation services, we had for the first time the greatest amount of people who came up and they were able to express themselves in their own language because it is testament to the diversity that we have in the region. We had English in terms of Deirdre Williams from St. Lucia also speaking, addressing the audience in English, and we also had people making calls for the LAC IGF space to reflect the region's diversity. When it comes to the steering committee, what is important is the line in bold. Each stakeholder group is free to select members using their own methods. So we have 4 stakeholder groups that form part of the steering committee. When it comes to the government representatives, it is actually the members of the coordination mechanism for the ELAC process, which is Latin American Caribbean Plan for 2018. This is a process driven by the UN ECLAC. Those members are the ones who determine which of those members will form part of the government's group in the LAC IGF steering committee. And similarly, when it comes to the technical community, the technical community uses its familiar process of consultation via mailing lists to determine who are the members that will be part of the technical committee group on the steering committee of LAC IGF. And each of these communities, they have their own mechanisms in how they relate, and it was felt that there was at no time should LAC IGF Secretariat get into those details of how each community relates internally. And of course, LACNIC has served as the secretariat to the LAC IGF since the beginning. And last but not least, this just gives you a snapshot of what some of those priorities that were identified at the LAC IGF level. You would see for the most part many touch on internet society issues. We have a few that do refer to the development imperatives of access along at least two of the panels that were convened, but for the most part, you have at the LAC level a lot of discussion dealing with freedom of expression, human rights, the right to be forgotten. So one of the ongoing discussions we have between LAC IGF and Caribbean IGF is that this does not mean that these issues are not important to the Caribbean. However, how we may prioritize some of our issues may be somewhat different to what may occur at the LAC IGF space. So I will leave it there, and I'll now hand over the session to Carlton, who will explain a bit more of his own reflections on participating at the global level.
Thank you, Kevin. A couple of things that you probably will hear a lot in words. You'll hear a lot. You hear about subsidiarity. You'll hear about collaboration, and you're going to hear about priorities because those things intersect in what has happened, at least my journey. I got involved because somebody else tapped me to be involved. Jacqueline Morris tapped me to be involved. She sent somebody to my office to recruit me into the ICANN process. And one of the things that we found out, we had a couple of people that been together at this for quite some time. And we have managed to punch above our weight because of the support we give each other. When Jacqueline was chair of the LAC at Large Advisory Committee, it was our duty, myself and Lance Hines and Devon Antilok Singh, to be her research arm. So we were always sitting behind her, helping her with any kind of data information she needed as she chaired the meeting. And that was important to us. It was important to us that she was on the global stage and she was representing us. And we had a role to play in ensuring that she was successful. And not only that, it gave us an opportunity to present our priorities. Our priorities were important, and we had to work them in. We had to collaborate because we were from small island states. We were generally, there's a few of us in the room, and we had to find people who were willing to work with us and advance the issues that we thought were important. So it was not too hard to find allies. We found allies a lot from the Pacific, certainly from the Canadians who were always supportive of our issues. And we moved into the mainstream. I can tell you that since then, it has always been about each one bring one, because we had to build capacity. A capacity building, believe it or not, involves a lot of hard work. But it also, you also looking for others to assist, but also to hand over to. I have been involved in this. And Jacqueline, for other reasons, have kind of pulled back a little bit. But in terms of what we've done together, it is just a continuation of what has happened. I don't know how, here's the thing about being involved at this level. You have to show up and you have to be willing to take the mantle. So Jacqueline spoke about the fact that I participate a lot and I volunteer to what we call hold the pen. So I write the documents, I develop the MOUs, I develop the rules of procedure, because that's a way to imprint your own priorities, our priorities at that level. You participate. I have been able to participate at the global level and quite some big global committees. For example, I have been a member of the expert working group looking at the next generation of registration data service, the WHOIS. I spent years chairing the WHOIS working group in the at-large. From 2009, I chaired that working group. So I became involved at the ground level and developed the expertise, developed the knowledge of what was happening. I am now a member of another review team. I mean, in ICANN, there are review teams that look at various issues. I am on what is consumer competition trust work review team. I'm a member of that. There's about 15 of us from all over the world looking at that. I am active in working groups, GNSO working groups, looking at subsequent procedures working group. This is a working group that came out of, I was co-chair of what we call an applicant support working group. And this working group was looking at ways to get more global south people involved in the new generic top-level domain program, helping them to become a part of the business of the domain namespace. All these GTLDs, if you look at who owns them, very few people from the global south are involved at that level in ownership. And that working group was trying to find a way to get them. So some of us, we are locked out for various reasons. And we were trying to find a way to get more of us involved in that. They are looking at what should happen when the next round comes. And that is what the subsequent procedures working group is all about. And the good thing is we have a few more people involved now. Richard Adela is there from Trinidad, and a couple of others are there. Bartlett is there, looking at it now. The point I'm making is that when you get involved, you have a voice. And when you have a voice, you have influence. You can influence. And what we are doing is trying to build capacity. Don't be bothered by the fact that you're not an expert. Just showing up and listening for a while is important. Jason is doing some of that now, and it's coming along. In due course, he's going to be sitting at the table and making his contribution. That is how you become an expert, and that is how you're recognized. I mean, they don't call me because of a pretty face, a handsome face. They call me because they know I have some experience and some knowledge of what's happening. They call me because I can create partnerships in advancing ideas and priorities for us. Let me give you another example. Tracy Hackshaw was a vice chair of the GAC. And when Tracy became vice chair, we usually go to the at-large meetings. But every time Tracy was there in the chair, we made it our duty, Jacqueline, myself, Lance, Dev, to go to GAC meetings just to ensure that Tracy has some support in the room. And they know this. And this is our approach to it. What we prefer to do, and this is what the Project 215 is about, and what Albert was talking about. Instead of breaking up into the little individual groups, what we need to do is to come together and form a group so that we cross-fertilize, so that we are aware of the issues in the GAC, so that we are aware of the issues in the at-large. And so we look to find partnerships, look to find people who will support us in doing this. The history of the GAC, IGF, for example. Tracy, for the last probably 2012, four cycles, has spent a lot of time developing a workshop that deals with issues that would be relevant to small island developing states. And so we have a CIDS agenda. I have appeared on it. several times to support, and it is something that we do in collaboration with the Pacific Islands. Now, this is at the IGF, and it goes to the subsidiarity rules again. You go to the place where you want to address the issues and do it there. Let me tell you why the IGF for the subsidiarity and subsidiarity. We as small island developing states, we have some compelling issues with respect to internet. Baseline access. Access and the cost of access. And then what we do with the internet. Our internet is about the development agenda. It's about economic and social development, utilizing the internet. That is our agenda. It so happens that people in Nauru, people in Cook Island, people in any of the Tuvalu, people in Fiji, they have those same needs. They are struggling with duopolies that limit access. They are struggling with inadequate legal and regulatory frameworks to deal with the internet issues of today. Those kinds of things. So when we go to the IGF, those are our issues. And that's where we collect a global response and global support for those views. I will say something about the participation models. You have to understand that showing up is half of the task. Showing up is half the task. And my brother here has been beating on it and saying more people need to show up, more people need to show up. He's going to say even better than me. But you need to understand that you shouldn't allow your voice to be stilled by so-called experts. It is a dangerous thing for you to feel locked out because you feel the experts are there and you have no voice. You have to show up. And what we are about is each of us pulling another of us into this. The Caribbean, our space, need people to show up in these global fora. And if you're not in the room sometimes, your issues will not be heard. And that is what I will recommend to you. You need to understand you go to the place where your voice is best suited. You look for allies, you collaborate, and we build capacity by each of us bringing one more into the fold. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm not as eloquent or as well versed as the gentleman to my left, but I will say that I have to drive home the fact of participation, as Carlton said. The national IGFs, your people's voices have to be heard, and his point about not having to be an expert, I'd go beyond that. I think that the experts can benefit from the everyday man's input into any process. So that, for example, you know, sometimes we have conferences and we're talking about DNSSEC and we're talking about IPv6, and people are like, you know, what does that mean? How does that affect me? And if you're not in the room to realize that there's something out there you don't know about that could be affecting you, so you're being affected without knowing. And so participation, being involved, even if it's just a matter of reading the documents that are on the website, because there's a plethora of information on any organization mentioned here. You can go and find a giant amount of resources, you know, whether it be ICANN or you go to LACNIC's website, or even if you go to the universities in the Caribbean, you can find information that can help you participate. But beyond that, the model of how the internet is governed is a model that personally I believe that can benefit other things in our society. So by participating in that model, understanding how the multi-stakeholder approach works, understanding how you build consensus through, as he said, capacity, but also through trust. And you can't build trust with someone you don't know. So that participation helps you to build that trust to where that participation now can be concreted by other people that you trust and know. And those things can't happen unless we show up. This meeting that I went to this year in Helsinki, I mean, honestly, yes, it was overwhelming, but at the same time, it was fantastic to understand that little Belize can put input into a global process and affect that process. You know, we're a small country, less than 500,000 people, but our comments were noted. And that is, I think that is something that has to be appreciated. People, the significance of that is tremendous, you know, and that's not possible unless there's somebody participating. And I can't say anything enough about that, the participation.
Great. To our two speakers, thank you very much. I think just summarizing a bit some of the key messages that came out. Carlton's, which is very clear, and I think it's very pertinent here. It's go to the place where your voice is being heard, form alliances, hold the pen. And we don't need to be experts to do this. We just need to show up and continue showing up. We need to be consistent in this activity. And Kimano also raised the point of the multi-stakeholder model being helpful not only in the internet space, but for other areas of society where we really need to get more people involved, not only in just hearing of an issue, but actually coming up with the solutions for that issue and coming up with the implementation of the solutions for that issue. At this point in time, we are looking at opening up the floor, and we want to tie on some of the conversations that were started before in terms of experiences in participating in various fora, and also look at what are some of the opportunities and challenges we see with the various spaces that we have, that we had mentioned and we had discussed here this morning. So I see Jackie.
Yeah. Hi, Jacqueline Morris, TT Mag. What I really wanted to bring up that y'all hadn't reached to is the idea of not only working in the international arena, but bringing it back to the local. Because, for example, you talked about the IGF and the regional IGFs, the one we're in here, and the LAC IGF. But then, one of the things with capacity building is that we need to bring it back down to national level. So we need to start pushing as well for us, those of us here, for example, to go back to our countries and take this knowledge and information and discuss it with our people in our own countries. So we should have a Belize IGF, we should have a Trinidad and Tobago IGF, we should have a Barbados IGF in our own space, and then interconnect all of those things so that our ideas, similarly to the structure of the at-large, all of the on-the-ground ideas in the nation can go up to other regions, and we can also do the capacity building coming around.
Thank you, Jacqueline. That's exactly what we do. Let me give you one example of the Project 215. The original idea behind it was that we were going to look at issues surrounding the name and number space. But then we thought we had to build capacity at the national level, and we had to embrace the issues that came at the national level. So if you look at the cast of characters in it, one of the things that we were committed to is that if you had an issue that you saw in your national space that you thought was important enough and you wanted to, we were committed to argue it, to talk it through with you by bringing it into 215, because we understood that you have to build, to sustain interest. You have to have people who understand the connections at the national level to what you were doing before they become even suited or even interested in going to the regional and the global level. So this is one of the things. The national IGF, you have to actually embrace institutions, embrace agencies, embrace associations in the national space. And that is why we couldn't be too picky about what was multi-stakeholder. It was whosoever will may come. Because one of the things that we always argue with some other people about is whether or not, for example, people who in governments could be a part of a multi-stakeholder end user organization. And we have a philosophical difference between some of our brethren in the Latin American space, because we feel, because we wear many hats. I sit here, I have about 5 or 6 hats. We feel that you have to involve everybody. So because Kevin worked for government, he can be part of ISAC. No, Kevin worked for government, but Kevin could be chair of the ISAC chapter, because what we need is skill and what we need is interest. And so this is how we see it. And that's one of the things we need to emphasize, that the multi-stakeholder community in the national space can have different colorations. What we want to ensure is that everybody's voice is counted and everybody is contributing to the objective. As long as you're committed to the objective, then your voice is required, your voice is welcome.
Thanks. And just, yes, okay. Just to add to that, the same thing that Jackie, you were highlighting, that information, that reporting role is very important, both ways, not just going up to the global, but coming back down. And I think too, with this, same as Carlton is saying, at this national level, half of the battle is won when we understand what each one of us are actually here for. And we reduce the assumptions as to what the other does. Governments, they have a role. They are the ones that we entrust through elections to develop our public policy and our laws. So the idea is that we want to ensure that it's informed. So a real multi-stakeholder process from the Caribbean sense needs to involve everyone. And I wanted to just highlight again the question of capacity building and just put Nigel on the spot to just say how the ideas and the concepts of the Internet Governance Institute could fit into this same multi-stakeholder dispensation.
Yeah, thanks, Nigel Casimir, CTU. We'll be reviewing that whole, as I said, terms of reference in the course of our review of the version 3 of the policy framework. Just to make just two quick points. One about the voice thing. And in this very last meeting of the GAC that I attended in Helsinki, the chair of the GAC, privately in after one of the set meeting sessions, was talking to myself and someone else from another of the developing countries and so on, encouraging us to keep intervening, because in the GAC, there are a certain small group of countries that tend to monopolize the interventions, right? And one in particular must be heard on every single issue that comes up, whether he agrees or disagrees, right? And the chair was saying that we also need to start putting our voices in there so that we don't allow these people to monopolize, and don't go sit in the back, come and sit down in the front. That all of that sort of thing, that basically let your voices and yourselves be as prominent as possible. One of the other things that Tracy, when he was vice chair of the GAC, helped to develop was a working group on underdeveloped areas as regards DNS business, right? And coming out of the last GTLD round, when it was found that very few applicants from the Caribbean, in fact, very few applicants from the Caribbean, that Africa, comparatively speaking, as well, so there is interest in terms of this working group to find ways and means of increasing participation from those areas. We have a comment coming from the Barbados hub that maybe you would want to comment on, Mr. Chair.
Well, I'll read the comment out and see if we can get some reactions from our panelists here. So ISOC Barbados, the Caribbean has had good representation in the global IGF process in the likes of Carlton, Bevel, Tracy, Dev, and many others. Albert has also done a good job in increasing participation from the region in the ICANN process. We should thank them for their sterling contribution. We should also consider how we can leverage them in a more robust and structured way to build capacity with our policymakers, perhaps through the IGF Institute. We should consider this as a project that can be executed over the next 1 to 2 years to enhance our level of participation. And that comes from Rodney Taylor at the ISOC Barbados group. So, reactions?
I can react. Rodney is one of the warriors with us. He doesn't want you to know that. Yes, but Rodney is preaching to the converted here. Rodney's worked with us a lot and in helping us. You don't see his name a lot, but I can tell you that we consult all the time. Let me give you an example. Nigel mentioned the GAC and the development of that working group in the GAC to look at on the surveyors in DNS. That was not happenstance. That came out of the fact that Tracy was vice chair. I was co-chair at the time of the applicant support working group. And we figured we had to broaden the base of support for the applicant working group objectives that we were doing. It was a GNSO chartered working group, GNSO ALAC chartered working group, but we needed GAC support to make sure that it was widespread. And so you see WhatsApp, we use it because Tracy is up there. He might not be able to ask a question, but he can send me a WhatsApp to tell me ask this question. And we do it all the time. We're in the room, we're communicating. Sometimes we get a call, where are you? I want you to sit down here and be involved in this conversation. He can't be embedded in a conversation as much as we have and what it is. But it goes back to what Rodney says. You have to use the tools you have and maximize what it is that you can bring to bear to get better results. And this is what we are committed to. It is just a matter of orchestrating and doing what you have to do when you have to do it.
Thank you, Mano.
Based on Rodney's comments, I'd add him to the list of what we call the internet superheroes from the Caribbean. These people have done a tremendous amount of work, yes, and continue to do a tremendous amount of work in the background. And that's one of the things with the internet is because so much things are happening that you don't see as an end user. You have no idea, of the strong currents that these individuals are individually and collectively swimming against. In terms of the participation, again, you have to show up to be involved, but also you have to support those who do show up. So if you're sitting at home and one of our heroes, Mr. Daniels, we're in Helsinki. It's daytime in Helsinki, but it's the middle of the morning in the Caribbean. But he was online with us, saying, say something, come on, giving that support. And that's the kind of thing that's very important because, as you said, participation, you need participation, you have to have some confidence. And if you're not an expert in a particular field, your lack of confidence can be detrimental. But with support from these superheroes to know that you can affect any process, you can speak up and be heard. And that's the important thing.
Okay. Thanks very much for those two contributions. So we are about to wrap up, and we are wrapping up with these very important messages that we have here. That we really need to be each other's keeper. We really need to show up, and we need to support each other. We're talking about mentorship among ourselves to get more people into the fray. And I believe from what Carlton has been referring to, or Kimano has been referring to, we see already here the avenues for those things that happen. I think most times one of the difficulties is that a lot of people are not aware of the avenues to pursue to further particular interest. So I'm just going to wrap it up right there. I think a major part of this internet governance work that we do comes in networking. And with that, I will hand back over to someone who will make announcements about the break and the further networking activities that happen. It's really a people network at the end of the day. Thank you.
Yes, we will take our break now, but we will make it shorter because we have some interesting case studies we want to hear about as regards national multi-stakeholder initiatives, right? And I wouldn't want to have us miss that on account of time. So, because on this afternoon, we want to get the benefit of the collective knowledge of you in the rooms to help us in developing a toolkit for fostering national multi-stakeholder groups. How, you know, what guidelines could we come up with for getting them together? So we'll take the break now. It's a little bit after, it's already a little bit after 11 o'clock. And 11:10. All right. We will resume then at 11:30 with the case studies, and we will take that for, I guess, probably the scheduled hour. So that'll probably run from 11:30 to 12:30, and we'll have to try and make up our time this afternoon. All right. So take your break, and we'll resume at 11:30 with the next session. Thank you to the panelists.